Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? How would you know you can't hear the show? Or something like that. I don't know. I'm not exactly certain how that would work out in all of this. But, hey, it looks like we're having weird connectivity issues, which is odd because pretty much everything else, internet-wise, is working just fine. It's just Nicecast tells me it's having difficulty connecting, and if it's having difficulty connecting, then Justice will be having difficulty getting the stream. And if he doesn't get the stream, well, then he can't give it to you. Now, that doesn't mean we can't record the show anyway, although it does present certain logistical problems, and means that we won't have a full show available for reuse and rebroadcast later on at some other date if, say, next June 28th I find myself on vacation. It also, of course, screws around with our normal schedule and may or may not get in the way. Joan should be able to call, like technically there's nothing preventing her from calling at the regular time, but of course, well, for one thing, there will be a mysterious and weird disconnect as she listens to the radio and tries to get ready for her segment and finds that I'm just not there. Let's see. Don't know. Let's see. Getting an update from Justice here. It looks like everything else is working. I'm just not sure why our channel is not connecting. All right, well. No real reason. I don't know whether I hit a button or anything overnight or something, but we'll try and investigate this and put together a pre-taped show, which gave me the chance to go back and finish the rest of the breakfast that I had left behind, rushing to the microphone to try and get things online at the correct time. Well, anyway, I guess Justice is back up on here. He tried a reboot too, so I'm pretty sure this is happening on my end. And, hey, what can I tell you? That's sad news. I would be more worried about it if the rest, maybe I'd be less worried about it if the rest of the internet wasn't working for me. But it is. So that's kind of troublesome and weird. And I'm not certain what it is. I was thinking I would be back on the air in, 5 minutes or so after we rebooted, and then I could make a big joke about being the mystery witness at today's mysteriously, and lots of mystery going on, hastily scheduled January 6th committee hearing. Of course, by now, you too will have heard that despite announcing that all further hearings would be pushed back into July, there was an announcement yesterday that post-haste there would be one extra hearing scheduled very quickly, and no real explanation as to why, except that it was somebody whose testimony, I guess, for whatever reason, they really had to get on record really quickly and do it right away. And no announcement yesterday for most of the day as to who that witness would be or whether there's more than just one witness. But the mystery is over. Last night around, just before 11 or so, there were some reports that it looked like it was going to be one Cassidy Hutchinson. And this morning, it appears to be confirmed as the case. The Hill has a story on it. Who is, by the way, Cassidy Hutchinson, the former Meadows aide? Oh, that's who she is. Testifying on January 6th. Well, I guess there's more. Hutchinson's earlier taped testimony, I believe, was used in one of the earlier hearings to, I think it was her and her taped testimony that began naming the names of the various members of Congress who had made pardon requests. So that's interesting. That means there's more information that the committee says is new that they need to develop from her besides the names of the people who asked for the pardon. So it's big mystery, and then today at 1:30, provided there's an internet or whatever, we will all find out more about this. They're rolling the tape of her testimony now. Mr. Gates, Mr. Brooks, she's naming names here. I can see in the closed captioning of her testimony. And it looks like she's giving her testimony in a Capitol Hill office, like an antechamber there, sitting on a couch, a furniture that you recognize if you've worked on the Hill as standard office furniture. So it might be a committee room antechamber or something like that. And anyway, what does the Hill have to say about her? Cassidy Hutchinson on Tuesday, that's today, despite the fact that nothing's working, will appear before the House committee investigating the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol in a last-minute session convened to hear new evidence. Hutchinson served as a special assistant to former President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and her appearance is a big get for the committee. She will be the first White House employee to publicly testify. They had, of course, the private pre-taped testimony already. She's already sat with the committee's investigators 3 times, providing some 20 hours of testimony. As an aide to Meadows, who himself was at the center of efforts between the campaign, Congress, and the Justice Department, Hutchinson has provided insight on activities happening across the White House. It was a taped deposition with Hutchinson that the committee used to detail which Republican lawmakers had sought pardons from Trump. It was her testimony that indicated that Meadows had been warned about the potential for violence on January 6th. And Hutchinson also told investigators that White House lawyers had advised against the Trump campaign's alternate elector scheme. Her testimony has even offered details on Trump's reactions the day of the riot. It was Hutchinson who detailed Trump's indifference to chants of Hang Mike Pence unfolding at the riot, suggesting that the supporters have the right idea. Cassidy Hutchinson might turn out to be the next John Dean. Norm Eisen, who served as special counsel to Democrats during Trump's first impeachment, told the Washington Post earlier this year, referencing the White House counsel who testified against President Nixon in congressional hearings. A first-generation college graduate, Hutchinson attended Christopher Newport University. Hey, how about that? We're all familiar with CNU. Telling her alma mater, I have set a personal goal to pursue a path of civic significance. I'm not certain exactly what significance that statement has for anything or anybody, but there you have it. Anyway, Hutchinson first joined the White House as an intern in 2018, having previously completed internships with Senator Ted Cruz and Minority Whip Steve Scalise. So, okay. Gee whiz. While Hutchinson has appeared in a few video clips played during the committee hearings, much of Hutchinson's insights into January 6th. Hang on just a second. We might as well pretend we're on the air and time our breaks appropriately, just in case we do come back on the air. If the signal reconnects, we want to be able to jump live into the show at that point. Where were we? Yes, right. Much of Hutchinson's insights to January 6th have become public through the committee's court battle to try and get Meadows to turn over remaining documents he's sought to withhold through executive privilege. The panel has yet to formally announce Hutchinson as a witness, but I guess that time is now. Well, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, except we're not here on Netroots Radio. Well, normally we are. That's pretty sad. All right, well, we'll have an abbreviated show today, and I know, I keep thinking, well, maybe I should just hang out and do the show later on, or take a nap or something like that, but I feel like, we'll get you whatever abbreviated version of the show is available, and we'll try and upload it ASAP so that those of you who like to get your fix in the morning will have something available to you. And then we'll all watch Cassidy Hutchinson testify around 1:30 p.m. this afternoon. I don't know what else to make of it. Let's see. The only thing I was thinking, the one thing that hasn't been explained so far is the why of having this testimony offered now. There's nothing. She's not a new witness. She says she has some new information, but what it must be something extraordinary, really, to make the committee say that they want to bring her in immediately and not wait. I mean, it's not that long until July, although I don't know what day they might have had her scheduled or when the first hearings in July were set to resume. But I imagine they're probably otherwise a good 2 weeks away. I imagine they would take off during the July 4th period. And I don't know. Let's see. I'll take a look at the calendar, see when we think they might reasonably have been expected to return. If they took the first week, including July 4th, off, perhaps somewhere around July 11th. And so, yeah, it would probably take them about 2 weeks to get to Cassidy Hutchinson otherwise. So the only thing I could think of while pondering this last night was that possibly one of the major newspapers may have figured out some portion of the story that wasn't previously revealed, but to which Cassidy Hutchinson might testify. And they might possibly have asked the newspapers to hold off on publication, saying, well, we know that part of the story. It's not, you haven't discovered it, but we would like the chance to reveal it under the committee's questioning and sort of help guide the narrative and fit it into our story. And it may make a difference in how persuasive the hearings are with the American public if you reveal the story and sort of reveal it out of sync with what we're doing, or too early, or before we can get the testimony of some person or something like that. It could really ruin things. That's the sort of thing that you might be able to talk a major newspaper into doing and saying, if we still get to run exclusively the news we've discovered or some portion of it exclusively, and to do it first and to claim the credit for that, we might, make a deal here and step out of your way and allow you to get some testimony on a record. It might not be Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony that they're so worried about. I don't know, but we'll see. It might be coming directly from her, whatever it was that they wanted to break themselves that the newspapers knew about, or it might be something related, say something Meadows did, or something she testifies to having heard Trump say or do that the papers were ready to run with. And, maybe she talked to the papers, and that's my best guess. She may have been asked some questions, and the newspapers found out something that the committee either should have revealed or was going to reveal, perhaps in July. And the reporters called the people at the committee and said, "Did you know that she said this, and we're looking for you to confirm this, or if you knew about this part of the story." And they say, yeah, we knew about that part of the story. We were going to talk about that in July. And the newspapers say, well, if you can, we'll hold at your request, but only until Thursday or something like that, Wednesday, Thursday. If you can get her testimony before then we'll follow up with the story afterwards. That's a plausible explanation in my mind, as to why they would quickly call that hearing. And it wouldn't necessarily mean, oh my God, we're going to arrest Trump tomorrow or anything like that. It's just the pacing with which they were hoping the story would make it to the newspapers, and the order in which they would move from the committee revealing information and then the newspapers running with it. Anyway, I thought that was of some interest. This morning's, let's see, is this any longer relevant? This is, I thought, an interesting roundup of the news and the connection between all of these stories that we sometimes hear from Heather Cox Richardson in her Substack newsletter. Greg usually brings these to our attention. Today, this is something my dad emailed to me as we were talking last night, trying to puzzle out what might be happening in the committee this morning. Or rather today, anyway, this afternoon. And her June 27th entry from yesterday evening begins this way. Midday today, the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack, the committee, announced a hearing to present recently obtained evidence and receive witness testimony. This is a surprise, and it was not until late tonight that reporters confirmed with their sources that the witness will be Cassidy Hutchinson, an aide to former President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Hutchinson was the person who revealed to Congress that members of Congress had asked for pardons. Legal analyst Asha Rangappa tweeted that she will be watching to see if Hutchinson can testify that Trump, Meadows, or members of Congress either knew about or planned violence for January 6th to pressure Pence. If so, it brings them into crosshairs of seditious conspiracy, she wrote. And again, I'm not positive that the testimony necessarily does more or less, for that matter, to directly connect top players. I think it might be an issue of timing and what the newspapers found out and their desire to get it on record before the newspapers reported it. But that's just speculation. It could very well be that they got something that's super explosive and they just didn't want to wait. We'll see. While we have been focused on the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, more news has come out about the attempt of Trump and his allies to overturn the government, as you knew it would. You should never have taken your eyes off of that. Indeed, scholar of authoritarianism Ruth Ben-Ghiat today noted that there is a relationship between the insurrection and the radical Supreme Court decisions coming out. Sure. Justice Clarence Thomas has been writing opinions and footnotes that are to the right even of the rest of the radical court, and today he suggested, yesterday of course, that he would like the courts to revisit, or the court, his court, to revisit the 1964 New York Times v. Sullivan decision that provides some protection to media outlets from being sued for defamation by requiring a plaintiff to prove the outlet acted with, quote, actual malice. Thomas wants to make it easier to sue media outlets because, he wrote, the New York Times and its progeny have allowed media organizations and interest groups to cast false aspersions on public figures with near impunity. That would be about him and his wife, more than likely. And the Donald Trump dream of loosening up the libel laws. Ben-Ghiat tweeted that self-protection and protection for corrupt family members is a huge driver of authoritarian behaviors. He feels threatened and will try and change the legal order to avoid scrutiny. Radicalized people no longer care about how it looks to outsiders. That's an important aspect of this. No, don't worry about being a hypocrite or being called out as somehow corrupt. You get what you need to do done, and don't worry about it. This will happen. They will call you a hypocrite. Let it roll off your back. When you win, you'll be right, and they'll be wrong, and there'll be nothing anybody can do about it. You know, the old playbook. Well, anyway, in this particular case, Thomas's beef is with the Southern Poverty Law Center for calling out Coral Ridge Ministries Media Incorporated as a hate group because of its opposition to homosexuality and gay rights. The SPLC identifies as hate groups any groups that have beliefs or practices that malign or attack an entire class of people, typically for their immutable characteristics. SPLC's hate group designation lumped Coral Ridge's Christian ministry with groups like the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis, Thomas complained, and that hurt their ability to raise money. Oh, womp womp. Anyway, recent stories about the attempt to overturn the election include, most notably, Politico's report of last Monday that British filmmaker Alex Holder filmed the Trump family from September 2020 through mid-January 2021 to record for posterity their actions during the historic election. Well, it definitely was historic. We know that. Apparently, this was a family project, and a number of the people on the campaign did not know. That's very interesting. I was curious about that, and curious about why they didn't realize they were on camera. And this is a very stupid family, I must say. And interesting, too, that the campaign can't, overrule these things and say, look, I know you have this vanity project going on, but we got an election to focus on. We can't be having this. Besides which, we're trying to steal it, and we probably shouldn't film that. Last Thursday, the January 6th committee interviewed Holder. It has also subpoenaed the tape and the raw footage. There are continuing signs that the attempt to overturn the Democratic victory in 2020 and install Trump in office swept in more lawmakers than the committee identified last Thursday. when news broke last Tuesday that Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson had tried to hand off slates of false electors from Michigan and Wisconsin to then Vice President Mike Pence at the joint session of Congress on January 6th. Johnson initially passed it off as the work of an unnamed intern and called it a non-story. 2 days later, Johnson changed his tune, saying that the office of Representative Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania had sent the fake slates of electors, and that Johnson, his chief of staff, and Trump-affiliated lawyer Jim Troupis had coordinated through text messages to figure out how to get the fake ballots to Pence. Kelly's office promptly said Kelly, right, hasn't spoken to Senator Johnson for the better part of a decade. Still sticking with that. And he has no knowledge of the claims Mr. Johnson is making related to the 2020 election. Meanwhile, in Colorado, yes, another story I have tucked away here for you. I can give you more details on it if you want, but this is a great roundup. Tina Peters, an election official from Mesa County, you know her, who has been charged with crimes for her role in trying to overturn the results of the election, on Friday told Nick Corasaniti, remember we were having difficulty with deciding how he pronounces that last name, and Alexandra Berzon of the New York Times that, drumroll, I don't have a drumroll. All right, with that, Lauren Boebert, and I feel like we should make some kind of duh noise or something like that, but okay. Lauren Boebert encouraged her, quote, to go forward with stealing and sharing voter information. That information, allegedly obtained through identity theft and illegal breach of computers, of course, later turned up on a right-wing website at a symposium organized by Mike Lindell, the owner of the MyPillow company and a leading Trump supporter, alleging voter fraud. A press secretary for Boebert calls the claims false. Yesterday, we also learned that the Department of Justice last week seized the phones of John Eastman, the man who wrote the infamous memo outlining plans for Pence to steal the election. Yes, that video now circulating widely online as well. In a lawsuit trying to get the phones released and all that was on them deleted, Eastman's lawyers explained that federal prosecutors had stopped Eastman outside a restaurant in New Mexico on June 22nd. This was the same day that federal agents executed a search warrant on Jeffrey Clark. Trump wanted to make Clark acting attorney general in the days before January 6th so that he would work to overturn the election. Right-wing insistence Friday night that the weekend would be characterized by rage as pro-choice supporters turned violent seemed designed to draw false equivalence between those who stormed the Capitol to overturn the election and those angry at the Supreme Court's refusal to recognize a constitutional right that the American people have enjoyed for half a century, and perhaps to justify brutality to silence those protests. In fact, aside from sporadic violence against the protesters rather than from them, the protests were peaceful. There is another link between the recent Supreme Court decisions and the January 6th attempt to destroy our democracy that creates an unprecedented situation. If Trump is prosecuted as the leader of an attempted coup, a coup that may have included some of those who voted for Trump's 3 Supreme Court nominees, what does that do to their positions on the court? Well, what an interesting mishmash of observations. It's a good roundup of yesterday's news. The connective tissue between each of them is not entirely clear, but I like that they're all thrown in there together to give us something to think about. By the way, the answer to the last question, what does that do to their positions on the court? Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. Now, theoretically, it undermines their legitimacy and calls into question their ability to serve fairly and whether or not they're serving during a period of good behavior and possibly makes them impeachable. But you know how these impeachment things go with Republicans in Congress when one of their own is being impeached. So, basically that comes down to nothing. But that was an interesting jump from the seizure of John Eastman's phone, which I didn't realize was actually a couple of days ago. I guess it was just that the video of it was given to Tucker Carlson, I guess. And he spent yesterday making this is like the biggest favor in the world to Rudy Giuliani, who's been out there saying he was murdered by this pat on the back that he got the other day. And now the only thing looking more ridiculous is the video of John Eastman being searched and having his phone seized. Although I didn't catch who it was, but this morning one of the reporters, one of the more dedicated January 6th reporters, one of the Ryans, as I recall. Now I can't remember exactly which last name pairs up with it. But at any rate, making fun of the fact that Eastman uses one of those belt loop phone holsters still, which is kind of, late 2000s or something. It's just not, the normal thing these days. A little bit outmoded. Anyway, that was of some interest. But him complaining about the seizure of the phone. And I don't know, this was really strange. I mean, I guess we'll have to ask some criminal defense attorneys what they thought of this. But he's complaining that he's being asked to put his hands on his head for the search so that they can seize the phone. And he says, well, I'd like to see the warrant. And essentially they say, yeah, all right, but hold on a second. And they continue their search. And then they get the phone and they take it. And he says, well, I still haven't seen the warrant. I want to read the warrant. And then they hand him the warrant. I mean, it's like, well, the warrant's in the car. Hold on a minute. I'll go get the warrant. And they turn around and they grab it and they hand it to him. But by that time, the arresting authorities have already got the phone in their possession. Though there's no time for them to do anything with it. They just have it in their possession. And he's like, see, now look at that. They already have my property, and only then do they produce the warrant. And I don't think that has anything to do with it. I mean, you're entitled to see the warrant, of course, if you're being searched. If it's not just a reasonable cause search, reasonable suspicion search, and being stopped and frisked. If it's a planned seizure, then they'll have to produce the warrant. But I don't think that there's anything. I mean, it seems to me like a childlike understanding to say, well, I asked to see the warrant, and while they were getting the warrant from the car, it already existed, they found the phone and took it, and they didn't do anything with it. No data, no private papers of any sorts were discovered at that point. And then the warrant was produced, and I read it, and I found it, to be facially sufficient. And it was first in time that they took the phone, even though they didn't do anything with the phone before they produced the warrant. And I'm wondering whether this is just like, I don't know who he thought he was dealing with, or whether he thought that there was real reason to be concerned with the order in which these things happened. And yeah, I mean, in years past, certainly any normal criminal defendant attempting to appeal all the way to the Supreme Court because there was a 15-second delay in between the police or whoever arresting authorities laying their hands on the evidence and then the production of the warrant, which had already been issued. I don't think that makes any difference at all, but, I guess all he really has to do is say it, and then the right-wing talking points machine will pass it around, and they'll pretend that this is a huge violation of the Fourth Amendment and see if they get anywhere with it. All right. Well, at any rate, I thought that was kind of interesting and fun news. I enjoyed watching the seizure. And like I said, Heather Cox Richardson put together a very interesting connection for all these things, not all of which are all the way connected in my view, but all a bunch of things to watch. Let's see, other things that are in pocket that are worth sharing. The Guardian reports that via Hugo Lowell that the January 6th committee is now focusing on phone calls among Trump's children and aides from well before the election. And I'm not certain where they're going with this one, but it seems interesting. Footage captured by the documentary filmmaker that we heard from the other day. What was his name? It's in here. We'll read it. I'm reading you the subheader, though. Footage captured by the documentary filmmaker understood to show ex-president's children grown children, of course, privately discussing election strategies, which I think is not I don't think that's a bad thing for them to be doing, although they were supposed to be, firewalled off because they're running the business, et cetera, et cetera. But they're supposedly walled off from government, except Ivanka and all the rest of them. But at any rate, here's the story. The House Select Committee is closely focused on phone calls and conversations among Trump's children and top aides captured by the documentary filmmaker weeks before the 2020 election. The calls among Trump's children and top aides took place at an invitation-only event at the Trump International Hotel in Washington that took place the night of the first presidential debate, September 29th, 2020. The Select Committee is interested in the calls, the sources said, since the footage is understood to show the former president's children, including Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, privately discussing strategies about the election at a crucial time in the presidential campaign. House investigators first learned about the event hosted by the Trump campaign and the existence of the footage through British filmmaker Alex Holder, there it is, who testified about what he and his crew recorded during a 2-hour interview last week, the sources said. The filmmaker testified that he had recorded around 7 hours of one-to-one interviews with Trump, then Vice President Mike Pence, Trump's adult children, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, the sources said, as well as around 110 hours of footage from the campaign. But one part of Holder's testimony that particularly piqued the interest of the members of the Select Committee and the Chief Investigative Counsel Tim Heaphy was that when he disclosed that he had managed to record discussions at this September 29th event. The Select Committee is closely focused on the footage of the event, in addition to the content of the one-on-one interviews with Trump and Ivanka, because the discussions about strategies mirror similar conversations at that time by top Trump advisors. On the night of the first presidential debate, and this is new to me, I think, they may have reported it before, but I never really took much stock of it. This is just a thing that crazy-ass Bannon says, but on the night of the first presidential debate, once again, September 29th, 2020. Was that the first debate, or I don't remember now. Was the 20th? It was the first debate. I might not have been the last one for some reason. I thought that they might have said earlier that September 29th was the last debate, but at an earlier debate, maybe Bannon said this. But no, that same night, Bannon said in an interview with The Circus on Showtime that the outcome of the election would be decided at the state level and eventually at the congressional certification on January 6th. So that's pretty extraordinary that they know, that he's willing to say on September 29th that this would all come down to January 6th. Not the most unusual thing and not impossible either. I do recall that by late September and October, we were already reading the wargaming stories, right? These groups that had gotten together saying, what if there's a delay in the counting because of all the mail-in ballots, and Trump goes on TV and seizes the initiative and declares victory, even though it's very clear that it's going to go the other way and that mail-in ballots will take a long time to count, but he'll try to start sowing doubts about the legitimacy of those ballots and to what end, and where are the choke points that the Trump campaign might be able to exploit if they're just willing to exploit anything. If they can lie and say anything they want, might we see this thing go all the way to January 6th? I don't recall whether any of the war games took it all the way out to January 6th, but there was definitely lots of post-election maneuvering and lawsuits and false claims and outright lies that were a part of the war games. So it's entirely possible that he's just thinking along the same lines at that point. But it does seem extraordinary in hindsight. Well, anyway, apparently he tells them they're going to try and overturn this election with uncertified votes, Bannon said. Asked how he expects the election to end, and this is again back in September, Bannon says, right before noon on the 20th, that would probably be January 20th, in a vote in the House, Trump will win the presidency. And remember, that was one of the outcomes that they were hoping for in throwing the electoral votes of 1 or 2 in the war games, all people thought they would try and challenge 1 or 2 or maybe 3 states to try and make it, not 7. I don't think anybody had that on the bingo card, but there were definitely war gamers who thought that the end game was to try to get it to a indeterminative electoral vote count so that the election was thrown to the House of Representatives where they had good reason to believe that they would have the advantage and there would be more state delegations voting Trump than Biden. So that's not terribly unusual. However, it does, I would say, file this under every Republican accusation as a confession when Bannon says in late September 2020, they're going to try and overturn this election with uncertified votes. That should have tipped you off that Republicans were going to try to overturn the election with uncertified votes. What you may not have guessed at the time was that they meant uncertified electoral votes. So that was the new twist that we didn't learn until later. The Select Committee believes that ideas such as Bannon's were communicated to advisors and to Donald Jr. and his fiancée, Kimberly Guilfoyle, even before the 2020 election had taken place. The sources said, leading House investigators to want to review the Trump hotel footage. What appears to interest the panel is whether Trump and his children had planned to somehow stop the certification of the election on January 6th, a potential violation of federal law all by itself, and to force a contingent election if Trump lost as early as September. The event was not open to the public, Holder is said to have testified, and the documentary filmmaker was waved into the Trump hotel by Eric Trump. That's not going to do anything to enhance his reputation, or I guess it will do things to enhance his reputation as the dumbest of the Trump siblings. It won't do anything to help his reputation overcome that. Anyway, at some point after Holder caught the calls on tape, he is said to have been asked to leave by Donald Jr. Among the conversations captured on film was Eric Trump on the phone to an unidentified person saying, according to one source familiar, hopefully you're voting in Florida as opposed to in that other state you've mentioned. So just a little more documentation of somebody else's crimes. Anyway, too bad about that. And once again, every Republican accusation is a confession. Voter fraud being planned on the phone with Eric. The phone call, a clip of which was reviewed by The Guardian. We have to fake our break, right? Okay. Reviewed by The Guardian was one of several by some of the people closest to Trump that Holder memorialized in his film titled Unprecedented, which is due to be released in a 3-part series later this year on Discovery Plus. Little plug for them, I guess. Holder also testified to the Select Committee, and he interviewed Trump in early December 2020 at the White House and at his golf clubs in New Jersey and Mar-a-Lago. Very interesting. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show, somewhere in the ether, if not necessarily on Netroots Radio. Okay, boy, I hope we can figure this thing out and get it fixed. I hate to have it be a crapshoot again tomorrow morning. Still no idea exactly what it may have done it. We may have to call in the technical experts, if we have any, to see if we can figure this out. All right. We've pretty much reached the conclusion of the Guardian article we were reading right before the break. I guess the only extra piece of information in here is that Holder's testimony was, very closely watched the other day, and some of the things that he was able to demonstrate were very interesting and new, including an instance in which he showed the panel a discrepancy between Ivanka Trump's testimony to the panel and what he was able to capture on his camera. You'll recall early on in the hearings, they played clips of the video testimony of Ivanka Trump during which she looked like she's making a hostage video, for one thing. But for another, she says, oh, no, I'm out. I had nothing to do with this whole conspiracy. I believed Bill Barr. I believed the Attorney General when he said that there was no election interference that was significant and that my father had lost the election, more or less fair and square. What's interesting is that Holder let them know, and I guess we'll see the tape at some point, that he interviews her in December of 2020. And the New York Times has reported this, that Ivanka says her father should, quote, continue to fight until every legal remedy is exhausted because people were questioning the sanctity of our elections. That interview was recorded 9 days after former Attorney General William Barr told Trump that there was no evidence of election fraud. But in her interview with the Select Committee, Ivanka said she had accepted what Barr had said. Although I wonder whether if we take a closer look at it, she might be convinced that she was saying, well, I was eventually convinced by what Barr had said. I didn't say that I was convinced the day he said it, but I eventually came to accept it, and so therefore, blah, blah, blah. So I guess what's really the question is, does she say that she accepted it the day Barr said it, and then it turns out, no, she didn't, and later on she was telling the cameras, fight on, or what? We'll see if we can sort that out. All right, let's see, a couple of other things worth looking at. Well, let's see, should we hang on to this one? This is the New York Times reporting on the strange tale of Tina Peters. This would be the one with more information on what Tina Peters was up to when she was breaking into the voter databases in her county, and the possible relationship between her and Lauren Boebert, and Boebert possibly encouraging her to do this stuff. That seems certainly worth investigating and catching up with. I guess I want to throw out a couple of other things before we run out of time, and we're going to try to engineer our call with Joan. I let her know that though we're not on the air, if she just sort of sets her alarm for the regular time and calls in, everything on the Skype stuff should work, and we can just pretend that we're on the air. And I'm trying to think of how I can engineer it so that we could talk longer, given that we no longer have the constraints of actually having a live broadcast. But I probably shouldn't monopolize her time that way, and then I don't know how that whole thing will work out. But and I guess if we somehow manage to just flip back into on-air mode, we'll want to, I don't know. We'll worry about it when we get there. We'll see what happens. And hopefully Skype works. I hope that doesn't get in the way of anything. All right, let's see. I should probably keep these various screens open so I can see in case we pop back on the air. Something I want to note for the record, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit tomorrow when Greg is here and keeps us up to date on the developments in Ukraine, but vicious attack noted yesterday, Russian missile attack on a Ukrainian shopping mall. And I don't have the story at hand with me at the moment, but I have commentary about it that I wanted to sort of add to the record, but maybe I can find that and just note it for the record, and then we can get the correct story and the correct name. Russian strike hits Kremenchuk shopping center, NBC News. I'll grab their top of the Google search return on this one. Russian missile strike hits shopping mall with more than 1,000 people inside, Ukraine says. The number of victims is impossible to imagine, says President Volodymyr Zelensky about this. But yeah, where is it, though? Is that the name? I don't know whether that was the name of the mall or the name of the city. The attack hit a shopping center in Kremenchuk city. There's the city name. A city name in the Poltava region on the banks of Ukraine's Dnieper River. Dnieper? I don't know. Not that great with... I've seen the name. I'm not that great at pronouncing the name. Anyway... according to this story reported yesterday morning, the head of Ukraine's emergency services had said that so far 16 people had been confirmed dead, 59 injured. Certainly could have been considerably worse, but just, a brazen attack on a obviously civilian target, although I'm sure at some point Russia will say they were hiding missiles inside the shopping mall. Or something, I wonder whether they'll even bother coming up with any kind of justification. But what I found interesting was the commentary on it afterwards. Christopher Miller, world and national security reporter for Politico, covering this war in Ukraine, tweets this along with the video response from Zelensky. He writes, after today's deadly missile attacks in Ukraine, Zelensky says, the Russian state has become the largest terrorist organization in the world, and this is a fact. He tells the international community that doing any business with Russia means giving money to terrorists. Well, he's not wrong, although I always go with the mobster thing rather than the terrorist, but largely the same thing. I mean, mobsters rule by terror, and very frequently it's indistinguishable, their activities. So it's probably not really even a line worth drawing. I just thought it was interesting because they're sort of entering this obviously mobster, obviously terrorist phase now. And it's something that we've been noting for a long time, that the Russian government, like the Saudi Arabian government, needs to be viewed as something other than what we understand a traditional government to be. There are different types of non-traditional ruling factions, if you can call them governments, I don't know. But they're not like the traditional Western understanding of a government per se, that this is a mobocracy in Russia, and they're going to operate that way, and a lot of times that means operating ruthlessly and with no shame about it. From a slightly different angle, there's this news that tends to confirm it. And I'll start this one from the way I first came to, this first came to my attention through Reuters. And then we'll back up to try and do the background facts of the event. But here's the headline that Reuters ran with yesterday morning. I wanted to squeeze it into yesterday's show and didn't. Now we're not even on the air, but hey. Russia rejecting default tells investors to go to Western financial agents. That's the new headline on a piece that yesterday read, Kremlin rejects Russian default, says bond payments executed. The bottom line of this is that, Russia, like every other country, has lots of foreign debt, perhaps more than most countries, but holds a lot of, or owes a lot of money to foreign lenders. Lots of developed countries have the same situation. It's not unusual or worrisome or damaging in any way. But of course, the United States has its own debt to foreign creditors as well. The only issue is that you don't default on that debt. It's the sign of a collapsing economy and a collapsing government. If you can't honor foreign debt, you remember all the contortions we've gone through here in this country. Where, if the debt ceiling can't be raised, what about minting a platinum coin? What about some sort of presidential directive, some sort of extraordinary action that takes place to try and avoid at all costs defaulting on the federal debt? And, we do this because the entire international economic system, and in fact the entire international political system, depends on taking that debt seriously. But what if you were mobsters and you didn't care about international order or international law or any of those things, and you just said, screw it? Or what even worse, what if you intentionally decided to sow chaos in this system? What if you owed foreign debt and couldn't pay it, or just didn't want to pay it, and then didn't pay it, and then when the world said, hey, you're defaulting on your debt, you didn't pay, you just say, no, we're not defaulting, we did pay. And everybody says, I'm looking at the balance sheet. Look, I can tell you didn't pay. The computer keeps track of all the money that goes in and out of this account. You didn't pay, so pay up. There's no record of you paying. Yes, we did. No, you didn't. We did. What, are you trying to gaslight us? We know that you didn't. Well, what can I tell you? We did, and that's all there is to it. So we paid. We're in the right. You're in the wrong. What are you going to do about it? A reminder, We're a nuclear power. Maybe we'll invade you if we don't like the way you treat us. Just watch your step. And all of a sudden, it becomes obvious to the rest of the world, like, that's bad. We didn't think about what would happen if Russia either decided not to honor its debts and made us fight for the money, or worse, just made us, it froze us in our tracks because they're standing there insisting that they did pay their debt, and we're insisting obviously they didn't. And then it comes down to, well, we say we did, and unless you can change my mind, we're just going to consider this debt paid. Like, are we going to have to invade to get the money back? Are we going to have to nuke them? Well, that none of that will give us our money back. I don't know whether they really owe any of it to us or anything, but the Western, the international order being the we here. So, interesting, and holds out a really interesting possibility that may not be the underlying reality of the story. It may be that something else. There are technical issues, and I think that's actually what they're driving at. I think the Russians may actually be saying, well, we've been trying to pay our debt to you, but the sanctions that you've imposed on our country are such that it becomes impossible for us to make the bank transfers we need for you to pay. But we have the money at the ready. It's just that you're not allowing the transfer of it. But we consider the debt paid. If you don't want to pick up the money that we put in the bag, that's your problem. But it does reveal the possibility of simply saying, you know what? Don't even put the money in the bag. Just tell them we paid and see what happens. I mean, what if they just walk around flustered and say, I don't know what to do, and we get to keep the money and get to keep insisting that we have paid it? And then we can see where we stand in the world. Who will agree to simply credit us as having paid rather than fight us for the money? It's a very interesting and dangerous situation. So let's see what they have now under the new headline here in the Reuters piece. Oh, they've structured their site in an odd way. I can't seem to get, this isn't pop-up, but anyway. All right, here we go. Russia rejected claims on Monday that it had defaulted on an external debt for the first time in more than a century, telling investors to go to Western financial agents for the cash which was sent, but bondholders did not receive. The White House said on Monday that Russia has defaulted on its international bonds for the first time since the Bolshevik Revolution, as sweeping sanctions have effectively cut off the country from the global financial system. Until last week, Russia kept on paying its euro bonds in foreign currency as per issue conditions, yet its dollar and euro coupon transfers made in May ahead of the U.S. waiver allowing for such transactions expired did not reach investors. I'm already confused. Statements of a default are absolutely unjustified, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters on Monday, pointing to the May Forex coupon payment. The fact that Euroclear withheld this money and did not bring it to the recipients is not our problem. There are absolutely no grounds to call such situation a default. Euroclear did not immediately respond to a request for comment. On Monday, the finance ministry said that actions of foreign financial intermediaries are beyond the Russian finance ministry's control, asking foreign bondholders to speak directly with those withholding the payments. The non-receipt of money by investors did not occur because of a lack of payment, but due to the third-party actions, and which is not directly spelled out as a default situation by issue documentation, the ministry added. As the U.S. waiver expired and the European Union sanctioned the National Settlement Depository, or NSD, the Russian version of Euroclear and Clearstream Western clearinghouses, last week Moscow paid its next coupons due in Forex in rubles. President Vladimir Putin ordered last week that debt obligations would be considered fulfilled once a ruble payment equal to the Forex amount due was made. bondholders would need to open an account at a Russian bank to receive the payment. That might even be sneakier than I thought. Moscow would not block the payment's conversion into Forex and its transfer abroad, but investors would need to say in writing they don't have claims against Russia, the ministry has said. The banks are yet to be announced. That does sound rather interesting and complex and might be essentially getting around to the same result, but through a perhaps even more clever legal strategy of forcing, if you want to get paid, one, you got to get paid in rubles. Two, in order to get paid in rubles, you got to open an account at a Russian bank. Three, they may or may not pay you because a lot of these bankers are mobsters. And four, in order to get paid, you got to sign a paper saying that you got paid. And you might have to sign it before we actually pay you. And when we pay you, we might not let you take the money out of the bank. And some of the bankers are mobsters, and they might just put numbers in your column, but not actual money to match it. There is that too. The next section on this is titled Financial Nuclear Bomb, which seems appropriate. The group of 7 Western powers, major Western powers, banned transactions with Russia's central bank and froze its assets held in their jurisdictions, worth around $300 billion, after Russia launched what it called special military operations in Ukraine in February. Some Western politicians have called to seize the reserves frozen to rebuild Ukraine. The idea, two high-ranked Russian financial sources said they believed was behind the announcement of default, and which Moscow considers artificial. That's interesting too. By announcing a default, they can claim that sanctions work. Economically, financially, assets could be confiscated legally, one of the two sources said. Peskov reiterated on Monday that reserves were blocked unlawfully, and any attempts to use them would amount to outright theft. I believe that a financial nuclear bomb was used against us. No country in the history of mankind has experienced such sanctions pressure as Russia is now. Alexei Moiseev, Russian deputy finance minister, said last week. And that's the end of this particular article about it. Very technical in some aspects. I also have a Daily Beast piece, which, may prove to be less technical and confusing. But Russia, it's titled Defaults on Foreign Debt for the First Time in a Century. A.J. McDougall behind this piece. Thanks to the nations that have all but blacklisted Russia from the global financial system, the country has defaulted on its foreign currency debt for the first time since the Tsar fell to the Bolsheviks. On Sunday night, the Kremlin missed the deadline for an interest payment worth roughly $100 million on a pair of foreign bonds. This according to the Wall Street Journal, which marked the end of a 30-day grace period. The oil and gas-rich nation isn't exactly short on funds. Rather, as the Journal reported, international sanctions have strangled its payment pathways, cutting off its access to the international banking systems that would allow a smooth transfer of repayment. Although a financial crisis in 1998 caused it to default on its ruble-denominated bonds, Russia has not failed to repay its foreign bondholders since 1918, when the leaders of the Bolshevik Revolution spurned the previous regime's debt. Arguing that Russia has been strong-armed into defaulting, Finance Minister Anton Siluanov has called the situation a farce, according to the BBC. So, plausible deniability, I guess, on that one. They could be saying that it's the sanctions that have prevented the eventual recipients from getting their money, and they should talk to the responsible parties. But it's starting to sound like they might have come up with an interesting scheme to try to legally steal the money themselves. But an interesting accusation, nonetheless, that Western banks might use the fact that the sanctions make it impossible to transfer the money in dollars and call that a default, and there being a default now say, okay, well, the answer to the question is of what we're going to do about it is we don't have to invade you or bomb you or anything and try to extract money that way. We can instead seize and nationalize the frozen assets of the Russian government in Western territory and seize that money. And the Russians may or may not have a point in saying, well, now, hold on a second. That's just you declaring that in your country, in your mind, everything's legal with stealing this money. But, I mean, we could do the same thing. And, in fact, we're trying to do the same thing by paying these foreign debt bonds in rubles and forcing you to open an account at a Russian bank, which may or may not be corrupt from top to bottom. Well, how corrupt could it be? Numbers are numbers, right? Well, yeah. But then again, if they just put numbers in your account, that doesn't really mean you have the money unless they're willing to honor the fact that they've put those numbers in your column. And gee whiz, nobody really knows whether they're going to do that. In fact, that leads me to another story that has little to nothing to do with the political situation. But I don't know. I just feel like I want to get this on record just to tell you sort of how extraordinary this whole situation is. Where did I put this one? Did I not put this one aside? I'll have to take a look around. Oh, and then I want to get to one other thing that I know that Joan will probably be interested in. But, yeah, where is this other one? I don't know if I have it at the ready. I might have to go and search it out. But it might be, here it is, banked as one of the tweets that doesn't tell you exactly what's going on in Pocket. But here's something for you. Numbers are numbers, right? Here, a tweet, a comment from Charlie Mitchell, an Inside Cybersecurity.com editor, who is commenting on, well, let's see, one of Inside Cybersecurity's own tweets about a document. How do I describe this? It's linked here. And the document that they link to is their report on, I don't know what NIST is. And this whole thing is paywalled. And right, quite honestly, I think they should let you have access to this because this sounds pretty worrisome and something we should be looking at. The NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And NIST has issued this report. And this is what Inside Cybersecurity is willing to tell you as by way of teaser before their paywall kicks in. Charlie Mitchell reporting it here. NIST seeks comment on guidance for validating integrity of computer devices and says, don't assume trustworthiness. Worrisome. Explain, please. NIST's National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, what a dumb name, has issued the final draft for comment of supply chain guidance. Okay, supply chain, get you. Crafted to help organizations verify the security of the computing devices they purchase. This is a part of this supply chain I hadn't thought of. The part that counts how many things you've gotten or keeps track of all your things because it's a computing device, i.e. your computers, your phones, laptops, whatever else, cloud-based networks, etc. Organizations currently, they say, lack the ability to readily distinguish trustworthy products from others. Having this ability is a critical foundation of cyber supply chain risk management, according to the NCCOE, which I do not know what that means, which says, assuming that all acquired computing devices are genuine and unmodified, increases the risk of a compromise affecting products in, I think, and it stops here, in the supply chain, I assume. What's happening here, of course, is cybersecurity as an account tweets, NIST seeks comment on guidance for validating integrity of computing devices. It says don't assume trustworthiness. And then Charlie Mitchell, who reported the story for them, says, I guess another grab quote out of his own story, he can get past his own paywall, is, assuming that all acquired computing devices are genuine and unmodified increases the risk of a compromise affecting products in an organization's supply chain, which in turn increases risks to customers and end users, which makes the whole threat seem a lot more benign. Like, oh yeah, I know that there's supply chain threats. That means that when I get to Dunkin' Donuts, some days they won't have the blueberry donuts, right? Well, I mean, I guess technically it could mean they don't have any donuts, but so far so good. They've made the donuts with fair regularity, but certain products in shortage. I've gotten used to all that. It's bad, but I've gotten used to it. But what they're really talking about here isn't, it's certainly relevant to the supply chain, but really what they're telling you is the computers that you're using to take care of all the shipments, move all the goods, and track all of these things as well. And maybe they mean everything from the inventory supply apps that you might be using on your computer to the very computer itself. I don't know whether it's so much as giving you the wrong numbers. Like we've programmed our computers to say 2 + 2 is -7, and that's going to screw you up. Yeah, it probably will. But then there's a lot of possible industrial espionage going on. I think what's at the bottom of all this is, and they don't say it in this little clip, but I think what's at the bottom of all this is that they're saying, in addition to our having problems with Russia, saying we did pay you, even when they didn't pay you, is if you've bought your computers from China, or you've bought computers that may have processors built in China and other components built in China, are they screwing with your supply chain? Are they doing it on purpose? Are they just monitoring your supply chain and not screwing with it, but beaming the information back to Beijing for industrial espionage? Is it that or some combination of all these things? Is the banking system the same way? Very weird, difficult to understand. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, or somewhere else, perhaps. Who even knows anymore? Okay, well, yeah, that was a kind of a frightening frightening summary and no real answer as to what they're getting at, because I can't get past their paywall, which means that somebody's computers are still working. That's good news, but a frightening prospect as well, and also something that I guess the election denialists could seize and run with, and of course say, see, we told you that the computers couldn't be trusted, and they've definitely been manipulated by the Italian military and who knows whatever else they might throw in there. But I guess that would only feed their rumors, so we definitely have to be careful about discussing that and sharing information about it. But it's out there, and who knows who could be faking what out there. I guess we're overly reliant on all sorts of things like that, and, well, frightening and worrisome. But here's something that's not. Joan McCarter joining us, even though we're not even on the air today, but helping us fake it like a bunch of electors.
Kagro, it doesn't work if you're saying you're not on the air.
Shoot, I know,
and
right?
You're faking it.
I know, but like later we will be, sort of, because people will download it as a podcast, and we were never on the air for them anyway, so it doesn't matter. Well, I don't know. True. I feel like I have to be transparent, considering all the other things that aren't working as advertised. It's not that we're not working as advertised. It's just that we stopped advertising. You see, that's the out for us. Well, anyway, Joan McCarter, thank you for joining us, even though you are the surprise witness at today's January 6th hearing. No one will find out that that's not true until I put this podcast out. So for now, we can just say that. And sure. Very exciting news. I'm still trying to figure out exactly why they thought that this was so important that they had to do now. But, I don't know whether you have a guess or have you heard something.
Well, it could be what she has to say.
Yeah.
is so important.
I just thought, they could have probably waited until. I mean, I'm glad they're not. I was very unhappy having to wait all the way until probably second week of July to hear anything new. So this is very good. Well, we'll just wait and see. There's no reporting. You haven't seen anything this morning that says, well, now we know who it is. Here's why today. Nothing yet.
No,
Okay.
nothing yet. There's a lot of stuff that we know about what she's said to them so far.
Yeah.
And an interesting thing, Brendan Buck, who used to be leadership aide to both Boehner and Paul Ryan,
Okay.
said that she's been Meadows' chief person since he was in the House.
Oh, all right.
From when he was on the Hill, and that he never, ever, ever went to a meeting, no matter how small, without her. So she knows an awful lot about Meadows and what he's done.
Good. Cool. I'd like to hear more about his burning things.
Yeah, that's what I want too.
Yeah.
What exactly was going in the fireplace?
Very interesting. And I'll be very interested to listen in. And if they didn't plan this secretly, they should have. This idea of a suddenly calling a hearing when they said they weren't going to. Thinking back on it, I said, you think they should have engineered this from the start and pretended. But okay, we'll find out later. I guess I'll just have to wait my turn and find out later, unless there's something that breaks in between then and now. But it will be very interesting to see what she has to say, for sure. In other news, something I wanted to bring up, I would ordinarily have raised it in the last segment so that you could hear it in preparation for the show. But no, that's not to be today.
It is very strange to call in and not know what we've been talking about.
Yeah,
so far
it is. It's strange. It's also strange for me to say things and find there's no reaction to these things that I know would interest people who would ordinarily message during the show. So it's tough to do it this way. But here's the thing that I grabbed from the other day. I don't know if you saw this thing. This is a tweet from Matthew Stiegler, who is a regular enough guy, I guess, but just describes himself this way on Twitter: a Third Circuit nerd, and he works in the Philly DA's office. And he notes for the record something that I hadn't had in my eye for a while, but is an old problem for you and for me. He tweets, Senator Durbin is single-handedly letting GOP senators abuse blue slips to blockade Biden from filling red and purple state judicial vacancies before the midterms.
I did not see that.
Oh, I don't think it's risen to the level of top news report. And I mean, maybe it has, but gosh, it'd be buried under a flood of so many other important things. But he goes on. He's sort of retweeting his own tweet here. Senator Durbin is a very nice 77-year-old liberal gentleman. I didn't realize he was 77 already. What a fine senator he would have made in the 1980s, it says. What a disastrous Senate Judiciary Chair he is today. And I guess he's linking here the Judiciary Committee itself, tweeting that in light of the Supreme Court's decision on Dobbs, the Senate Judiciary Committee will hold a hearing next month to explore the grim reality of
I saw that
America.
one.
But apparently, here we are. There's some YouTube footage here as Senate Judiciary Chair Durbin let Ron Johnson, of all people, block Johnson's own pick for a federal judgeship.
Oh, good Lord.
I didn't see this one here. It noted his disappointment, though, and some YouTube of Durbin responding to Johnson, withholding a blue slip for, and it just says Eastern District of Wisconsin nominee, so a federal district court judge. But that's pretty amazing. I don't know if you saw that one.
Who was the user?
Matthew Stiegler. It's Stiegler. All one word, no underscores or anything. Fun. IE. Yeah, GLER. And
Matthew Stiegler.
Yeah. I mean,
Third Circuit nerd. Okay.
Yeah. So this was June 25th when he was tweeting this stuff. So I thought this was really pretty amazing. And let's see, I think there's a couple of other excerpts here. Hey, Senator Durbin, when you let Johnson block his own nominee, you bragged about how Dems hadn't blocked Trump's nominees. Bragged. Tell us, Mr. Chairman, what are those stats for ours on your watch? Very interesting. And then there's a little screen grab here. During the 4 years of Trump's presidency, Democrats returned 130 blue slips on 88 district court nominees. 85 of those nominees were ultimately confirmed. The Senate confirmed 168 Trump district court nominees who required blue slips. This means that more than 50% of confirmed district court nominees who required a blue slip moved forward only because Democrats negotiated in good faith with the White House and allowed those nominations to proceed. Although I suppose it's probably worth saying the Republican leadership of the committee might likely just as easily have said, oh, you're not returning your blue slips? Well, then to hell with blue slips, as they often do. But, yeah, once again, in an effort to prove that Democrats are better than Republicans, we return to the system of blue slips. I don't exactly know why, but anytime, I guess, you run into if you run into a Democratic senator who says, well, if we get rid of the filibuster or curtail the filibuster or carve out something, then Republicans are just going to do the same or worse when they get control. And that part is true. But
because, we know that. Right. We see them do it all the time.
Sure, that part is true and is observable reality. But if they go further and say, but if we forbear from doing it, then Republicans will be pressured not to do it when they take over, that's where we have a problem. Like, no, that's actually observably wrong as well. Witness the blue slips. If you can't do it directly with the filibuster because you haven't gone and done it, this is like the second or third go-round now where Democrats have gone back to the old rules in the hopes that they'll be the permanent rules when there are Republicans in the majority. And I guess the next time around, if we were to lose control of the Senate, would be the third time in a row that a change in control in the majority in the Senate has meant Republicans just say, oh, no, we actually just want to use the rules that are good for us when we're in control. And when you are in control, we hope you will be. I mean, we were going to pressure you to go back to the old rules to give us a break, but we didn't have to because you dummies, you did it yourself.
God. And this is who's in charge of the Judiciary Committee right now. Yeah, we're not going to be expanding the court anytime soon.
I guess not. I was a little bit more hopeful about stuff like that yesterday as I was explaining, to people. Well, okay, the president says he's not particularly inclined toward this, or he actually even opposes expanding the court or having a filibuster carve out, or much less getting rid of the filibuster.
Or doing anything.
Yes. Right. And I was saying, well, I will say we did go through the same game with Obama. When it was necessary to do these things, he said he was opposed to it, even though he had previously, before he was president, said he was in favor of it. But then as president, the job is to be cautious and to play a certain game with your Senate Democratic caucus. And they do these things. And Obama said, no, until the Senate Democratic caucus said yes. And then he said, you know what? Yes, actually. And then he spent the first half of the Biden administration advocating for even more. So it is possible that they're just not telling the truth about what they would accept or what they really think needs to be done. Not that that's doing anybody any good in trying to motivate people to get excited about voting or anything like that. But it's just possible. But then, of course, you read a story like this one, too, and say, you know what's also just possible? They're not good at this.
They're not good at this. They're really not good at this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that turns out to be the case. You've watched the blue slips as closely as anybody, and we didn't even see this one coming. But who could? There was an insurrection,
Yeah, Ron Johnson, right, of all people.
Can't believe you let him
they have been really good at churning out these judges. They've been filling slots very effectively.
That is good. And I guess I'm not too sad about Ron Johnson's choice for a federal judgeship not getting it.
It's just that they're so owned by Republicans, so absolutely positively owned. Yeah. And then you get this great bipartisan win of a not about guns gun bill.
Oh, yeah.
And, timed to be voted on the day the Supreme Court says, yeah, that stuff, the few things that you have in there about guns, we're going to take care of that. Don't worry about it. So,
yeah, that wasn't helpful. I don't know. I just had an idea, though, about Johnson's blue slip.
Yeah?
Does anybody know what they look like? Blue slips?
Just go hand Durbin a piece of blue paper and say, here, this is from Ron Johnson.
Right, or maybe give it to Mike Kelly.
And
say,
Mike Kelly can give it to Ron Johnson and he'll pass it on.
Right.
He won't even look in the envelope to see what it is.
That's one. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was thinking, we'll have Mike Kelly, because he's mad at Johnson now. We'll have Mike Kelly give the fake blue slip to Durbin, and Durbin will say, we got it, and go forward. But I like your idea even better. Your variant of it is hand it in an envelope to Johnson and say, oh, boy, wait till you give this to Durbin. He's going to hit the roof. But don't look in it, but... And then Johnson's just that dumb. Oh, boy, okay. Hey, Durbin, look at this. This is your blue slip. What? This could work. I don't see why he's waiting around, though. But I would love to know now whether this was all tweeted on the 25th, which is just a couple of days ago. By that point, we already knew that Johnson was lying about the electors thing. But had that registered in Durbin's mind yet? Like, did it ever occur to him at this point? Not only am I doing this stupid thing, but I'm doing this for a guy who was passing on fake electors. And why we're waiting for genuine documents from the forger, I have no idea. But apparently we are. But that's a good excuse to get around it if you were looking for one, Durbin. You say, for other people, I'm still honoring blue slips. But for forgers, I'll take whatever you got.
For the insurrectionists, for the seditionists.
Right.
You guys don't get a say. Yeah, just don't honor the blue slips of the... election deniers.
Yeah, I mean,
how many were there in the Senate? There was 147 total.
Yeah,
7 in the Senate.
You know what? I don't even know anymore. Probably this is about the Senate was a little bit more. They were very traditional and stayed in their opposition. Only the hardest core dummies continued to vote no on these things. Or I guess in this case, voting yes to sustain the objections to the electors. But, that's anyway. I just wanted to bring the blue slip thing to your attention because I know it bothers you a great deal, and we shouldn't miss this story, even though it's minor compared to the other things that we're having to track.
It is and it isn't, because it is just so emblematic of how broken everything is and how...
That's a good point, too.
How incapable of responding to that brokenness current Democratic leadership is.
Well, what a writer you are, Joan. Put that together. I was ready to dismiss it, and it's annoying, but it's not really a part of. No, you know what? You're right. It is. It's it's part and parcel of the same thing, and how we are sometimes Democrats find themselves outmatched in terms of inventing completely insane, crap to work around the fact that there's no policy happening or whatever, but that Republicans just continually make these things up and don't feel any compunction about it. And it doesn't necessarily mean I want Democrats doing the same thing, but why not say what's happening?
Why not say what's happening? Why not let us know that you see what's happening?
That too.
My real concern is that they just absolutely do not see what the Republican Party is now. I mean, leadership doesn't. Schumer might, but Schumer is not capable of responding.
Yeah, well, he's got to have the rest of his caucus with him, and some of them are willfully
And
blind to this
his
stuff.
choice in having the rest of the caucus with him is to cater to the largest problems. Manchin, Sinema, probably Feinstein. I'm trying to think of the ones who were most likely really adamant about doing anything about the courts, and I'm sure Feinstein is among them. And filibuster.
Yeah.
Because, she forgets her position on filibuster with
I
any given day.
why she's there for those things. I forgot that was a problem, but I forgot that I knew it was a problem.
Right.
All right. That seems odd. I also happen to see, just I guess somewhat related, you were saying, the inability of Democrats sometimes to recognize this. I guess encouraged by all sorts of things like TPM has this story. Kevin McCarthy urges voters to just ignore Thomas's call to reconsider other landmark cases, as Thomas pulls the alarm bell himself and says, I'm going to go after, I seek to have us reconsider all of the line of cases based on the privacy rights recognized in Roe, whether that's same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, right to contraception, all of these things out in the open. But what an interesting... they got a great picture of McCarthy to illustrate this piece, just looking dopey and clueless. That's his line. Well, ignore that. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. He's totally not going to do that, I guess, is the argument. And, I don't know that McCarthy has his pulse on the Republican voting public's minds here, but...
well, the Republican voting public,
they might be perfectly
the ones
happy.
who are paying any attention to Kevin McCarthy whatsoever are already there. They're thrilled with what Thomas wrote.
So they might be very happy to ignore it in terms of public discussion of it.
I think everybody ignores McCarthy anyway, no matter what. But
that's probably true. He really looks empty-headed in this picture here.
He looks empty-headed in every picture. He is empty-headed. This guy really is.
Yeah. That cuts through pretty interestingly. Sometimes he has I imagine he got elected on the ability to look like he could concentrate on things. Maybe. He's gray hair. He's concentrating on something worrisome. There you go. But no, not much. Also of interest to me, and I thought that you might be interested in the report from where? Where am I reading this? I think Raw Story covered it under the headline. I love the headline. Trump officials mocked Susan Collins after they tricked her into confirming Brett Kavanaugh. I hadn't heard that there was open mockery, but I imagined that it was the case.
Everybody mocks Susan Collins. It's a national pastime.
I guess so.
Of course they did, but did they really dupe her? I mean...
that's true, too.
McConnell did in many ways, and has continued to. Not just on Kavanaugh, but on a variety of things. The Trump tax plan.
Yeah,
when he promised, Pinky swore she was going to get votes on Affordable Care Act stuff, on healthcare stuff.
Yeah, well...
for certain, if she just voted with them on taxes, then she'll get her legislation on the floor.
I guess, yeah, there's reason to believe that it's either she, too, is incredibly clueless or that's just what she does. And it's starting to look like...
I think it's just what she does. I think that... does she want to play the fool? Does she want to have people think that she's out there fighting for all of this great stuff and getting these promises and then when clearly those promises are broken to pretend that she wasn't lied to, that she didn't fall for the trick? I don't understand the game.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Does she want the world to think she's gullible or evil?
Well, tough choice. I think she'd probably go with gullible. I'd rather be
And
gullible.
she's going with gullible, but then,
how many more
stupid.
elections will it even have to work
On the
for?
other hand, when you look at her fundraising, when you look at who she's got supporting her, you can see that it's all very well considered and thought out.
Yeah, I mean,
She's
I
doing
guess
what
so.
for. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah, the bank account says it's working. So I suppose apparently this was originally reporting from Rolling Stone and their piece that says that they inside the White House, I guess, ridiculing her as being easy to manipulate, with one going so far as to crassly mock her as a cheap date, which is really awful. On top of it, if there's anything that can make you feel just for a moment like, oh, poor Susan Collins, I guess it's that. But it passes pretty quickly because, she's doing some pretty awful stuff. And she's either, like you say, evil or just so far over her head that it's infuriating. And I can't believe she's never been defeated on all this. But you only have to defend it once every 6 years in the Senate. And I guess it's a game that you can get away with for a long time.
What was kind of interesting to me was how she was just steamrollered on the gun thing. She was the first one out, with her meetings with Manchin and whoever on gun stuff. She was going to be the one who did the great bipartisan thing. And McConnell and Cornyn just shoved her aside to put Cornyn in.
Yeah.
The politics of that was intriguing to me.
Yeah, that's interesting that that's the amount of leverage she's got left. If you're going to play the gullible fool, then there's the danger that, your own side might believe it, I guess. And they say, well, why would we want a gullible idiot to take the lead on guns? Although that would make a good signal, too, to the NRA. Don't worry, we put Susan Collins in charge. Oh, yeah. Okay, shoo. So, yeah, maybe they might have sweated it for a minute with Cornyn in charge, but they didn't have to. But
they knew they didn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they don't even have to figure it out. He probably called them and said, you don't have to.
It's a hard one for me because, yes, we did get Senate Republicans to the point of saying guns are a thing that we have to do something about. But by having this legislation come together and vote, I mean, they acknowledged that, yes, having dozens of school children massacred is a bad thing. So, we made that much progress with it.
That's true.
But what's in the bill is just so...
Yeah.
So not productive in the way that it's presented. I mean, Arthur Delaney is reporting this morning, so this is one small win, that what Republicans really wanted was to get rid of the lifetime ban for domestic abusers. When they were negotiating the boyfriend loophole, what they were trying to do was get the same sunsetting of the gun ban for these people applied to everybody who'd had their gun removed for this reason. They didn't achieve that. It just applies to the so-called boyfriend thing. Oh.
Yeah, they're difficult to comprehend, even, much less to deal with.
So, Democrats did fight back on that one, effectively, at least.
That's good. Helpful.
As just, I would like somebody in power, some Democrat in leadership to say, can we really call them the party of life when they refuse to even think of an assault weapons ban or raising the age by which people can buy assault weapons, or banning high-capacity magazines? Okay, keep your gun. You can't have a high-capacity magazine. When are they going to draw the line between abortion and everything else Republicans are doing to kill people, including supporting the death penalty?
Certainly the rank and file have been doing it for a while. I mean, it doesn't really make a dent, but I don't know. Sometimes the fact that you've made an argument even 200 times doesn't necessarily mean it's actually sunk in. Well, I don't know. I don't know when we'll see a leadership to do that. Perhaps next century. Who knows?
Perhaps next century. Well, these people can't live forever. This is just
true.
The next in line.
We'll wait
Also
to see
can't
who's
live forever.
there.
They're all old, too.
Right.
It's just this sense of complacency, this sense of everything's fine, everything's normal. I feel like I'm just a walking, dog in a burning room meme, but
yes,
there's just absolutely no sense that they get we're on the verge of a civil war.
No, nobody seems to be interested in saying that aloud in the halls of power.
And the lack
even as
of
they
urgency.
investigate it.
I mean, seriously, that the Biden administration did not immediately have a set of executive orders ready to go on abortion.
Yeah.
And that the press secretary was out there giving mealy-mouthed contradictory messages.
Yeah,
talking about strategic strategy.
Did they change their position? Because I went back to look at what they had said, and I found that the CNN reporter's tweet of what was said on Air Force One en route to Europe was deleted, and I wondered whether they were changing their position or clarifying, or whether it was just some other issue that had led to the deletion of this thing. But
the point being, we should not have had that.
Well, yes.
They had months to prepare. I mean, they knew with Texas what was going to happen when they decided Mississippi. They knew at least a month ago when the draft leak was. Draft.
I mean, there's no excuse there, right? How could you not be prepared?
And the lack of cohesion, the lack of strong action,
it is
really discouraging. Really discouraging. And it suggests to me incompetence.
Yeah.
First of all. But, are there warring factions in the White House? Is there division where they just can't decide how they're going to react to something, so they do it poorly?
Oh. Well, you wouldn't think so. I mean, not on this, but
No.
I guess that's what makes it all the more weird and upsetting. And I mean,
and to say on the one hand, the just the whole messaging of this. I tweeted a snarky tweet about Kamala Harris and sort of didn't get to the point I was trying to make because I ended up being in Breitbart for it. But anyway, the picture that they put out with her statement on Twitter.
Okay.
About how we're standing with you.
Oh.
From Air Force 2.
Yes.
In this nice, big, cushy cabin on Air Force 2, watching it on television. Watching the news break on television.
Yeah.
36,000 feet removed from the populace. Standing there watching it on television. And the message is, we're standing with you.
Yeah.
Did they not understand that those messages did not go together?
A little bit of the overflight of Katrina moment, I guess.
Yeah.
Just to draw the
and it's just
analogy.
that kind of. Well,
yeah.
Anyway,
she wanted to get something out.
Top of the hour.
It is, and because we had our technical difficulties at the beginning of the show. I guess technically we're just filling space that we didn't use at the top of the show. But I'm sure you have things to get to. So we'll wrap it up. But we have the leisure of being able to talk it out and then say, okay, well, now we'll end the show. But, but before you go, if you've got just a minute, I know your last published story from yesterday was about the Supreme Court decision in the school prayer case, which I'm sure that's just striking you as everybody else that now we're talking about the majority just simply making up its own fact pattern about the case and saying, well, we should be allowing, it's not really prayer in school per se, it's just somebody who in the middle of their day wants to take a private moment and hold a little prayer or, say something to themselves off in a corner somewhere, despite the fact that Sonia Sotomayor had to include pictures just to prove the fact of what was happening.
I don't know that that's ever happened before.
Yeah, this is the first illustrated
picture saying, "You people are lying."
Yeah.
Look, here's proof that you are lying. I mean, he clearly manufactured this to get as much publicity as possible, and it worked.
Yeah.
Boy. It brought hordes of people to the football games in protest. It got on Fox News over and over and over again. It was a media event, and the guy was clearly doing it to make it a media event. He wanted to become a Republican martyr. He wanted to become a warrior in the war on Christmas.
Well, that's a popular thing to do. But yeah, I thought that was astonishing. I don't think I had realized, nobody realized, I guess, until the opinion came out, how far out of their way the majority was going to make it look like it was just a little, whispered into your sleeve, facing away from everybody. And I like that they tried to characterize it as, well, this was like during downtime. The game wasn't being played. He could have done anything. Could have been making a phone call. Could have been, all the players can do whatever they want during this time. Like, well, it's about as obvious as it could possibly be that that's not the case. And it was rather extraordinary to see an illustrated dissent,
As the as the conservative six are just drawing a line through the establishment clause part of the First Amendment.
Really? Who should have a picture of them doing that? Trying to erase that. But look what you're trying to do. I'm not. That's not me. It's someone else. But really just an extraordinary moment. And I don't know, it brought me all the way back. As people were saying, they're just making things up. It actually kind of, I guess if people who thought that we were at some new departure point, who I guess missed the broccoli mandate and various other things that Scalia in his day brought to oral argument and then even into some of the decisions, just things that had never happened that he had either imagined or heard on Rush Limbaugh were making their way into decisions. And I guess we should have realized at that point, or more people should have realized at that point, the direction we were headed, and the fact that if they got 5, 6 on the court that were willing to work that way, there's literally nothing that's safe. And, that's the new reality. So, okay. So now, have a great day.
You can, everybody knows this, and it's going to happen after. The podcast will be out there after it happens, but you can follow along with today's surprise hearing on the front page of Daily Kos, where Brandy will be covering it, Brandy Buckman.
Okay, so we'll point everybody in that direction. That happens at 1:30 Eastern, which is like, I don't know.
Did they set it back half an hour?
Oh, is that right? I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was 1:30. Did they?
Thought it was 1.
Well, you know what? We don't know what time it is because you're on the wrong coast, for one thing, and for another, somewhere I have.
It's not the wrong coast.
Yeah. Oh, well, you don't think so? Okay.
Yeah, no.
Well, we have room for opinions for everyone, and we'll credit you as being correct because you're correct about the time of the hearing, so you might be also right about the coast. I was wrong, and isn't there one time zone, like a Canadian time zone, that's 1/2 hour? Is it the Atlantic province?
Is there?
Or something like this? Maybe I'm imagining that too. I may have no idea how time works, Joan. But I know this. We've played the music, which commits us to the exit. So I appreciate your coming on despite the fact that it wasn't on the air and you couldn't tell what we were talking about. It's very brave of you to just call in blind. I wasn't going to blindside you, but, I appreciate your...
You never know. You're a tricksy one.
Yes, that's right. Well, we invented a good trick today, that Ron Johnson thing. I expect to see that executed by the end of the day if we can get the personnel lined up. I appreciate the brainstorming session, John.
It was fun.
All right. Well, we'll catch up with you next week when we're hopefully back on the air and everyone can hear you as you say it. Talk to you
from netrootsradio.com.
All right. Well, it's sort of from radio.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Yes, and with Joan McCarter, who kindly put herself on the line despite the fact that we weren't on the air. See what she does to make sure that you have something good to listen to in the, we hope, early afternoon, maybe even late morning when we can get this thing up. Of course, I have no idea what Justice is doing or when he's doing it, but it'll be great and probably delivered via radio as well.